My name is Karen Stidham, and I'm Director of the Small Business Development Center here at Grayson College. The Small Business Development Center, if you're not familiar with it, is a grant-funded program through the Small Business Administration, Grayson College, and the state of Texas to help start and grow small businesses. Our one-on-one assistance is all entirely free of charge. Our training classes are free or low cost, as low as we can get them. So if you are not familiar with our center, I hope you'll give us a call and let us talk to you and see how we can help you. And I will give you some resources later. We also have centers, anybody in Cook County? Because we have a center in Cook County at North Central Texas College. Kathy Keeler is the director over there, and I have her information. So, in fact, I think it's in your packet. So if you need help and you're in Cook County, she's the one you need to talk to. I titled this presentation, "Are We Having Fun Yet?" Because when you mention budgets, people, their eyes glaze over, they get nervous, they think, I don't want to do that, how do I do that? It's not as bad as it sounds. I think it's important that we look at budgeting in a positive light, if we can. That's not always possible. But if we can, that's the thing we want to do. I understand that creating a budget is not the fun part of running a business. I understand that. But I also understand that creating a budget may be the most critical factor in keeping a business running. Because the financial side of running a business is absolutely essential. Many people, in fact most people, don't start a business because they like doing paperwork and creating budgets and monitoring finances. That's not why they start a business. But if they don't do that, they're not going to be in business very long, or they're going to struggle the entire time they're in business. So hopefully I can point out a few things today that will help you see this as a process and something that can be accomplished. It really can be done once you learn the process, and once you go through the process a couple of times, it really isn't scary. And that's where we want to get to. How many of you do a budget on a regular basis? Maybe I shouldn't ask that. Do you want to tell me if you do a budget on a regular basis? Probably not. You do? I bet you do, whether you realize it or not, and whether it's a formal budget or not. In one way or another, I think everybody's probably doing that. Let's define budget by Mr. Webster. What does he say about it? He says a budget is an estimate of expected income and expenses. That's pretty straightforward. He says it's a plan of operations based on an estimate. And that's exactly what we're doing. How do you know whether you can afford to hire another staff member? How do you know if you can afford to expand and add a class with computers or whatever you want to do in the future, unless you have done a review of your income and expenses? A plan is just that. It's not set in concrete. It's what you intend to do. And one of the keys to a successful budget is that we're going to monitor it throughout the year. A limited stock or supply. That's true. We have 24 hours a day. We have a limit to what we can do. We have a limit, most of us do, on finances. We have a limited amount of dollars to work with. And finally, to allot funds, time, and so forth. So we determine how the funds that we have are going to be allotted throughout the business to make the business successful. What others have called it is a spending plan. If you've ever heard Dave Ramsey on the radio, he says you're telling your money where to go. And basically that's what you're doing with a budget. It's an estimate, again, of revenue and expenses. An estimate is key. It's a tool, and that tool is to help ensure that you actually do have enough capital to operate effectively. Maybe you look at it in the lower terms as frightening, confusing, all of the above. I actually think the best way to describe a budget is it's a way to determine whether you have a business or a charity. If you want a charity, that's great. But if you want a business and you have a charity, that's not so great. So working through a budget is actually how you can tell how well your business is doing. One of the booklets in your packet is called How Am I Doing? We're not going to take the time today to go through that page by page, but it will help you to assess how well your business is performing. It talks about ratios, and I don't know if that's something that you use or not. Look through it when you have some time, and I know you don't have much of that either, but take some time to look through it and try to determine how your business is doing. If you need help or have questions, give us a call and we'll be glad to work with you on it. But it is very important to really take stock initially of where the business is. Are you performing to the best that you possibly could? Or are there areas that you could improve that would really help the performance and in turn relieve a lot of stress on your part? Okay, so how do we create a budget? What are the steps that we need to follow to create a budget? The first thing we want to do is look at history. What have we done in the past? And if it's a brand new business, then this is a little bit harder to do. But when you're an established business, look at history. What has happened in a previous period? Now this may be a month, a year, 3 years, whatever, however far you want to go back. But what has happened? That is your most likely gauge to what will happen. We sometimes will plug in a few other things there. If your population in your service area is increasing dramatically or declining dramatically, we have to consider that. But as a general rule, start with looking at the history. Then develop some reasonable assumptions. And what are reasonable assumptions? Those are basically gut instinct to what you think is going to happen in your business. And you're the best person to determine that. What do you think is most likely to happen in the next year within your business? Those are your assumptions. You think it will be about the same, you think it will grow, you think it will decline. We look at industries from those three standpoints. Growth, is it stagnant or is it declining? Because that makes a critical difference in the way we develop budgets. What is your expected revenue? This would be from all sources. And many different centers have other sources than funding. Maybe the parent fee is the only source you have, but you may have other sources as well. So look at all those expected revenues. Calculate the cost of providing service. That's really important. Do you know what it costs per child to get a new child enrolled in your center? Do you know what it costs you to do that? We have marketing fees. We have a lot of different things going on. There's a cost to acquiring another child enrolled in the center. Also, we want to look at some of the other costs providing service. It could be food costs. What's happening to food costs right now? They're going up. Yeah, they're going up. So that's going to affect your budget. That's going to affect how those funds have to be allocated. Then we want to look at calculating operating expenses. And again, it's what we expect to happen. As I said, at least I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if you do or not. Most of us don't. But we don't know. This is a fluid document that we're creating. And we're going to monitor it. You may hear me say that many times. If you just create it and put it in the file, it does you no good. Well, maybe some, because you've learned a little bit there. The key to it is to compare what's actually happening to what you thought would happen. We have a large form that I will be happy to email any of you that want it. It's called a cash flow projection worksheet. And on it, we have 2 columns per month. One is your estimate. The second one is to go back and fill in what actually happened. What does that tell you? Any ideas?
One thing it'll tell you if you're on budget or if you spent too much in a particular area.
That's right. It tells you how well you're maintaining that budget and your expectations for the way your funds are going to work throughout the year. So if I see that I estimated my employee costs at a certain point, but oops, I provide health insurance and it's gone up more than I anticipated, which is not an unusual situation, then what do I have to do? I have to get money from somewhere else. I have to make adjustments quickly. One of the strongest benefits to small business is that you can make adjustments quickly. You don't have to go through layers and layers and layers of an organization. You can make those changes quickly. And that is a real benefit But if you don't know you need to make them, what happens? It does you no good. In fact, you're going to be in trouble down the road. And then we're going to calculate what we expect our operating income to be. And there are different ways to do that. When we look at the prior data, just a couple of pointers for each of these. When you look at that prior data, as I said, that is your very best indication of what's going to happen next year. So really look at the numbers. Was it, and another way to do it that we're not going to have time to go into at this point, and you really need to do it with your individual financial information, but we'll be glad to help you do that if you want to, is to look at what we call common sizing, where instead of using numbers, we figure percentages. And then it's much easier to see that last year I spent 20%, no, that's not realistic. Last year I spent 50% of all of my budget on staff salaries. And this year I spent 70%. That's a little easier because when you're just looking at numbers, it doesn't tell you as dramatically what the change is, and it's not as easy to compare. We want, as I said, those reasonable expectations, educated guesses. You are the best person to make those educated guesses for your business. Absolutely. Now, what do you need to do that? You need to know what's going on in the industry as a whole. One of the sources, and you may want to take a look at it, there's one that's called IBIS World, IBIS World.com, and it gives you industry information. It is a subscription service, and we subscribe to it so we can get it for you if you want it free of charge. Don't subscribe to it. But it will give you a sample, and you can look at that and tell. They use a pie chart for one thing. Is this growing? Is it not? What percentage of children are cared for, example, in child care centers? Has that gone up over the last 5 years? Is it projected to go up over the next 5 years? It's a very well-respected research organization, and it really helps in developing those assumptions. With our revenue, when we're looking at that, a lot of people like to create what's called a stretch budget. They really want to grow, and so sometimes they'll create a stretch budget. If you do that, it's great, but bear in mind that's what it is. So know that you may or may not be able to get there, but that's where you want to be, and that's fine. We talk about stretch goals all the time. You know, I have a goal to weigh what I did in high school. Am I going to get there? Haven't yet. Get back there, maybe I should say. But that's a goal that I have in the back of my mind somewhere. So those stretch goals are good to have because they really help us to move forward and look beyond where we are. When you are calculating your cost, be sure you're really looking at all of them. And you don't need 500 categories. You really don't. We can get so bogged down in how we write the information down that we can't get anywhere. You just want that general knowledge of that. Okay, so what are we looking at when we're looking at the things that impact our budget? Some of them we can control and some of them we can't. Our licensing standards, not a thing we can do about it. Somebody mentioned the state's your friend. The state has licensing standards. We can't change them. So those costs associated with the licensing standards are there. We can't alter that. We can't alter that child-to-teacher ratio. It's there, so we have to deal with it. Child care is so labor intensive. That's one of the big challenges in having a successful child care center from the business standpoint, is that it's so labor intensive. And labor in most business budgets is one of the major categories, and it is in this one too. So careful staffing, careful staff planning is really critical here. Let's think, for example, if I hire someone who is well trained already, who has experience and really knows exactly what they're doing, I may have to pay them a little bit more, but I may not have to spend as much money in training and close supervising and corrective measures and firing and rehiring. So there are trade-offs there in how you plan your staffing and how you look for their experience. One of the things that I think is really, I'm really glad I found this word, trilemma. I don't know if you've heard that before. We talk about dilemmas. This is a trilemma. Gwen Morgan, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her or not. She was she is a theoretician, okay? She does theories. She develops theories about childcare, but she's also a practitioner. So she also is involved hands-on with childcare. I don't always take theories at face value. You know, the book, What I Didn't Learn at Harvard Business School, they learned a lot of theories, but that author says he didn't really learn how to run a business. So what we want is someone who has practical experience, and she does. She says that you have to balance, and I agree, the affordability, what can parents afford to pay, with accessibility and with quality. And that is a real challenge for every child care business. It absolutely is. What are those key programs? What are those critical objectives that you're looking for? In every child care program, you have some choices. What kind of curriculum do you plan to use? Some are much more expensive than others to implement. That is a big decision as well when it comes to the cost. I mentioned the staff training. Are they trained already? Are they ready to go? Or is it going to take you a lot of time and effort to get everyone trained and up to par? What about your staffing child ratio? You have to consider that very carefully. Parent involvement. Do you really work hard to have a high level of parent involvement with your center? I don't know. How many of you think you do have a good level of parent involvement? Or do you even try to do that? Is that something you think is important? Now come on, tell me. Is it? Is it not?
Involvement in the day-to-day or involvement as far as a relationship?
It could be either or both. It could be either.
Relationship.
Okay. But not a lot of day-to-day. Okay. Does anybody have a lot of parent involvement? And I'm guessing parents are not involved because they're working. That's why the children are at your center, right? So it's another one of those endless circle kinds of situations. Okay, what if we have, we do have choices with meals. Do children eat on site? Do children bring their lunches? How do you handle that? Does everybody provide meals on site? Anybody have a situation where the children bring their lunches? Everybody does it on site? So meals is a big issue for everybody here then. That food costs going up, which it is. That's a big issue. Okay, and the hours of operation. We can get into all kinds of things when we start looking at different hours of operation. Do you have to pay staff overtime? Do you have to split shifts? How many of you do that? Anybody? Yes. Most of you? Yeah. How do you handle it now? What are you doing now?
I split shifts.
Split the shifts? Okay. Okay. Do you have trouble finding enough people to do that? Employees?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It can be. It can be a dilemma. I have people all the time saying, I can't find anybody to hire. I can't find good people to hire is what they want, which usually means people who will take initiative and are self-sufficient and will do the job without you standing behind them and telling them the next step. That's generally what that means. It can be difficult. That's one reason that implementing an orientation for new staff is really important. I do that. It takes a lot of time. I wish I didn't need to because I wish I could just come in the door and get working. But it really, in the long run, is usually beneficial because even if they have experience in another center, they need to know how you run yours. They need to know what happens there. Okay, and finally, let's think about our policies. Policies can be really important when we're looking at the cost for a center. For example, if we have, what about the absence policy? How do you handle that? They still pay for that time, full rate? Do you give them a discount? Anybody give them a discount for absences or vacation time?
They get a vacation once they've been there a year. They get a week of vacation.
Okay, okay. So that's one way to do that. But it impacts because the cost of providing service doesn't decrease, well, maybe the child doesn't eat that day, but you still have to provide the meal. You still have the staff requirements. Your cost doesn't go down. So that's a very important consideration. One of the others that we look at in regard to that, those hours of operation and the absence policy, what about discounts that you give families for multiple children? How many of you do that? In the research I did, just to bring things up to date, I used to teach child development, so I do have a history in this area, but it's been a long time since I did it. But one of the things that the recent research shows me is that that's pretty much expected. Another thing that I found that a lot of people expect to see today and feel like they have to do in order to be competitive is to give employee discounts. So when you have employees that have children, discounts for those children. Again, that cost has to be made up somewhere else, because the cost, just because it's a staff member's child, doesn't mean it doesn't cost just as much to provide service to that child. So those are things that are really critical in policies within your company, in your center, that you may want to take a look at. I know we've looked here at I was on a committee some time ago where we looked at how to develop the policy for staff members' children or spouse to attend, or the staff member to attend classes here at discounted rates or free or whatever. It was a huge financial impact among the choices that we had to consider. So you really need to think about that. And is there a trade-off somewhere? Because those things really, really are critical. Other considerations, what age group do you want to serve? There's obviously a big difference in the cost of providing service depending on which age group you're looking at. So I'm assuming infants because of the staffing cost. How many of you have infants in your program? Everybody? Okay. No? Okay. Okay. So that can make a huge difference too in the cost, because that child to caregiver ratio is so high there. What are the community needs? One of the things we have to look at with a small business is that every successful small business finds a niche market. It's without exception. You have to find that little niche market in there. So what is it? What's going on in your community that your business can serve, where that gap is? I always tell my clients, you can't stay open more hours than Walmart, and you can't possibly carry more stuff than they carry. So what is the niche? How can you compete with that based on your competition in the community? How do you do it? My guess is you can provide better service than Walmart. See, that's one of those things. So look at where's the gap? Where is the gap? We have a lot of shift workers in this area, so that may be a gap. I don't know. Is that something you can fill, and that would give you that niche market? I don't know. It's different for every situation, every center, every community, but it's something to consider. We talked about the curriculum, the educational philosophy, the staff training. How much do you want parents to be involved? How are you going to manage those food costs, and what are those hours of operation? It's really important to consider all of those when you're developing your budget. Okay, we've got some pretty quick looks here at those parameters. Cost per child. What is the estimate of cost per child? And there are formulas for figuring that out. And I think it needs to be figured out by component. We need to look at the cost per child for the infants by age group. It's really important to do it that way. Then the 10% rule. Are you familiar with the 10% rule when we're talking about parent fees? I don't know if you've heard that before or not. But in most cases, parents can't afford to pay more than about 10% of their income in child care. So for example, if somebody is making $25,000 a year, they could probably afford, and that's for all their children, that's child care plural, they could probably afford $2,500 a year for child care. What does that say to you? If they make under $25,000, they probably can't even afford that. They just can't do it. So we have a lot of situations where we have to again, back to that trilemma, where we're trying to balance quality service with what parents can afford to pay. And it doesn't always have a happy ending. Some people just cannot afford quality child care. They flat can't do it. So one of the things that we want to look at with that 10% rule is our community. What is the median wage in our community? What is your niche market? Who is your ideal customer? Those are important things to look at when you're setting those fees. And then we look at functional cost analysis. The functional cost analysis includes various things, but we look at percentages. So I want to be sure I'm getting my percentages right here. The child care teaching, we're looking at a cost of at least 50 to 60%, maybe higher depending on fringe benefits that you may provide. That would be teacher salaries. It would include classroom equipment in the teaching side of it, the child care and the teaching. Administration and supervision. So this would be director. It would include things like office supplies. And if you want this breakdown, I'll send it to you. I don't think it's on the handout. And a suggestion there is about 12 to 20%. Again, where are you? Or if you're in an area where it's really difficult to find directors, to hire directors, then it's going to be closer to 20. If you're in an area where there are directors looking for work, it's going to be closer to the 12. The third one is the food program, and that would include food, kitchen supplies. It would include the kitchen staff, however you handle that. And you're looking at 6 to 19% of your budget generally in that area. Your occupancy, which would be things like mortgage, building maintenance, repairs, and so forth, would be 10 to 20%. And then other, which can include health, transportation, social services type things, would be 5 to 20%, depending on how many things are offered in that category. So if you look at your history, if you go back and look at your previous year's expenditures and see how they compare with this, then it gives you an idea of where you might want to start to adjust some of those costs.
What did you say on salaries?
The child care and teaching. So teacher salaries and administrative salaries are separated here. But
Okay.
for the child care and teaching, you're looking at 50 to 60%.
And that is just payroll and any kind of,
Classroom equipment,
and
that type.
classroom.
What does it cost to teach the child is what they're looking at in that one. And then administration, supervision is a different category. That's that second category. Okay. So the next thing you want to look at is estimating your income by source. And I crawled around several resources, and these were the sources that were frequently mentioned. The parent fees, obviously, is where we start. Any child care subsidies. What kind of child care subsidies do we have in this area? Anything?
CCCS.
Okay, yeah. And sometimes there are companies who are located near a child care center or the centers near the company, whatever. They may pay a subsidy to work with you to provide service to children of their employees. That's an employee benefit, and that's not uncommon.
And Gainesville, that is through NCPC,
Mm-hmm.
and the student mothers, there is a.
Right.
You know, I've only done that a couple of
Mhm.
times, because it's mostly CCS, but.
Okay, so there could be other subsidies, and that may be something you want to look for. You may want to see if there's some opportunities out there that work with companies. Child care is a major issue for any company, because what? If they don't have quality child care, the absence rate goes sky high in the business. So look around. All they can do is say, no, we're not interested in doing that, but you may find there is an interest in doing that. USDA food assistance, there are some assistance, various types of programs. Programs change from time to time, but we do have, quote, commodity foods, is what we've heard for years. Summer camps can get them, different entities can get them if you want to do all the paperwork and the reporting that's required there. Employee subsidies. Sometimes you have employee ownership in companies. That might be something to look at. Grants. Anybody have a grant? There are a few out there in the area of child care. Not to start it, but once you're in business, there are a few out there that will help you to actually take care of certain segments of the the population. Sometimes in depressed areas, there can be some grants out there to help, so it doesn't hurt to look. And then fundraising activities. Does anybody do fundraising activities in this area? What kind do you do? Do you mind sharing?
We do cookie sales once
Okay.
a year, but we do really well.
Okay. Okay. So think about how can you generate additional income for your center? It can work. Okay, so back to fee structures. We've talked about the cost per child. Most people, when they're projecting, they say, okay, how many children can I have? How many am I licensed for? Times the fee. And they say, okay, that's how much money I have. Is this enough? Is it not? What you need to be looking at is a utilization fee. In the first year of operation, most child care centers don't have above about 60% utilization fee, meaning the percentage of children who are actually enrolled compared to the number you're licensed for. Does that make sense? So if my capacity is 100, in that first year, I'm most likely to have about 60 enrolled in a brand new business, and then it changes. It can be as high as 95% for a well-established business, but that's the number you need to use. Rarely are you going to have 100% enrollment and 100% attendance. Have you ever had that? Have you ever had a day where you have 100% of everybody enrolled is there? Maybe, but it's not the norm. So you want to look at the utilization rate when you're anticipating that what you're going to have coming in. And then, is that going to be enough? Because you may need to work on that fee structure a little bit. You may find that when you look at that actual number, it's not going to be enough. You may have to bump those fees a little bit.
Excuse me.
Uh-huh.
Did you say what the median income was for our area?
I didn't, because I didn't
You don't
bring that in with me.
Okay.
But we can find that. Workforce, Texas Workforce can tell you that in a heartbeat. And that's what you want to look at, because if you look at that median income, and most of your clients would be considered employed in, most of your parents would be considered employed in that median income level, then that tells you about what the parents can afford to pay. And then that 10% rule kicks in. But look at who you are providing that service to. Are you looking at people who are in that median income level? Are you looking at people who are in a higher income level? That makes a big difference. And those are things that we help you figure out. It takes some time to do it. Okay, what's your competition charging? Are you charging about the same as the other centers around you? I don't know. I didn't call and ask everybody. Do you think you are? Do you check that? Is that something you pay attention to? Because that's a balancing act too. You may have a very good program, but if you are way above all the competition, then you have to be able to tell people that your program is superior, and your customer base is going to change. So it can happen, and it can be a good thing, but you have to handle it carefully. Looking at the amount available from those other sources we talked about, if you have fundraising, if you have grants, if you have any kind of subsidies other than parent fees, that's a part of what you look at too. And then really looking at the cost of each child care component. What does it cost me for each infant? What does it cost me for the toddlers, the school age, the after school care? Because you're dealing with all those components, and we don't have a one size fits all here. We start with how many children, what's the income? That's where we start, but then we need to break it down a little bit more. And that's a key to really helping a lot of centers see where they can improve their income or they can reduce their costs some. It's really important to take a look at that. Any questions? Doesn't bother me to be stopped, so I found out through experience that you probably won't remember at the end of the presentation what you're thinking about now. So if you have a question, let me know. Then let's look at the fee formula. Okay, I have no idea why that division sign is biweekly fee, so mark through it. It shouldn't be there. Okay, when we're figuring the fees, we figure 50 weeks. Again, we've got vacations, we've got absences, we've got all kinds of things going on. So on average, we're going to look at 50 weeks instead of 52. Then we look at the license capacity. So we've got 50 times 100, if we're licensed for 100 children. And then we multiply that by the utilization rate, which is the percentage of children that attend. So your utilization rate, for example, in the first year I said normally centers operate at 60% capacity, so your utilization rate there would be 60%. And then that will give you very close to the fee income that you can expect. It's a simple formula, but it works. And as I said, depending on where you are, do you know your utilization rate off the top of your head? Is this something you figured before? What do you think it might be? What we're looking at, if you've ever been a public school teacher, is average daily attendance. Okay, that's what we're really looking at here. Take a look at it and see what it is, because that's important to know. It's really important to know. Okay. And we've talked about how the policies can affect that utilization rate. With all of the fee calculations, we really want to look at that. That's a key. When we're estimating expenditures, we're ready to go to that category now. We've figured out how much money we think we're going to have coming in. If you use a fundraiser, one of the cautionary notes is only put what you know you're going to do. And that's hard to anticipate, but again, look back at history. How much have you consistently raised over time? That's what you want to use there. Then we're going to start spending our money. So when we start looking at those expenditures, what do we need to consider first? Where do we start? What do you think?
Personnel.
Where?
Personnel.
Personnel. That is the elephant in the room. That is the big part, so you want to start there. You want to consider all of the resources, not just money. Do you have any trade-off? Do you have people who volunteer time? Do you have any way that you can do intern programs? I know I used to teach childcare at Southeastern a long time ago in a totally different life. but we had students who had to do so many hours, it was a pretty good chunk, I can't remember. As a part of their child development class, they had to actually be in some sort of a child care facility. And so we had interns that could go in and do various things. That can save you some money. It can help. It can be very helpful because it can free up your staff to do other things. So see if you can find something there. You can collaborate with other agencies. You can do some trade-offs. And again, you have to think outside the box. And I can't tell you what they would be in your particular location, but brainstorm. See if there's any way you can collaborate. Do you have an art teacher that needs childcare? Do you have somebody that can come in within your community and provide more services that can help you in some way to expand what you're doing? That can be very beneficial because it can give you a niche market. You may be the only child care center that has a certified art teacher. That helps marketing, and that helps create a niche. Okay, include contingency fund. What is it the state requires now? When you start a child care, you have to have so much money available. Do they not do that? What am I thinking about? I sure thought it was a child care. Okay. If they don't, it's even more critical you have to do this, okay? You need at least 2 months of operating expenses in a contingency fund. And you treat it like it is not there. It is not, oops, I overspent the budget this month, I got to pull from my contingency fund. This is, oops, our building flooded. We're going to be closed for 2 months for repairs. This is what will keep you in business if you have a catastrophic situation, if something happens. The key to planning that is the old adage that you don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but you know it is. You know, hadn't been that many years ago, we had a lot of flooding in Sherman, and a lot of businesses lost records, they were closed, all kinds of situations. Another one that I really love is when the highway department decides to tear up the road in front of your business. That can affect your income. So that contingency plan is to keep you operating in situations where otherwise you wouldn't be able to, and to help you recover, keep paying your bills during the time that you have no income. It's really, really important. Okay, then when we have the general information, we're going to look at it line by line. We're going to look at salaries and benefits. We've talked about that. The occupancy cost. What does it keep you to keep the doors open, to occupy the facility? Supplies, and supplies are things that are going to be used up. The permanent items, equipment, should last more than 1 year, several years hopefully. The administrative, and that would be, this is not administrative salaries. This, in this category, is again the business. Telephone, postage, printing. Does anybody use postage anymore? I don't know. Everybody uses email. All kinds of things going with the office operation. Your staff development, required training, needed training, things like that. And this does include the substitutes. If you have staff development that you need to send people to, and it's not on Saturday, then you've got to have a substitute. So under staff development, we've included substitute cost. And then other expenses. It could be any number of things that you include in your center. And those are the primary expenses that we want to look at and how we want to lump that together. They don't name marketing. They don't have marketing really in this resource that I was looking at for this, but marketing needs to be in there somewhere. People need to know you're there. And marketing is not necessarily the same as advertising, but they are so closely related. But you have to tell people you're there. And what kind of marketing do you do? How do you let people know what's going on in your business and where you are? It used to be yellow pages. Everybody used the yellow pages. Not so effective anymore. Social media. That's what I was waiting for. Good. Facebook. Does anybody use Twitter? I don't know how effective it would be. Facebook, Twitter, what am I leaving out? Those are the primary two. Do you have a website? How many of you have a website? Okay. Why not? If you don't have one, why don't you? I mean, I want to know. I'm serious. This is helpful to me. You don't have time? You don't want to do it? Cost? What?
I don't have one because I'm really not into social media. I don't have
Okay.
Facebook, I don't have all these things.
Okay. An honest person. That's the most common answer I hear. I don't know how to do it. So I bet somebody on your staff does. Doesn't have to be you. This may be one of those collaborative things. What if you have a parent who's a guru that really knows all about this? Then what can you do? You can say, I need a website. How about you create a website in return for X number of days of childcare that you don't have to pay for? I don't know. Will that work? I don't know. Think about it. That's one of those collaboration things. If you want a super, super simple childcare website, call us because we can help you do that cheap. You have to buy a domain name, which is, I think, $40. But the website itself is cheap, and we'll help you set it up. But it's important to have one. In this day and age, it's important to have one. It is. Okay, so look at the social media, look at Facebook. On Facebook, we don't want to sell stuff. We get turned off. I get a thing all the time, somebody that's selling stuff. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm on Facebook because I want to see what my kids are doing. I want to see the photographs. That's it. So be careful about selling on Facebook. But you create relationships, and that's what social media is about. You create relationships. Am I going to be more likely to use a specific child care center if I trust those people? And how do I learn to trust the people that are there? I create a relationship. And one way to do it, to begin to do it, is through social media. So if you don't know about it, see if somebody on your staff does. If you do know about it and you just are not doing it, I would really encourage you to think about it. What they tell us is you need to post something at least weekly to really make it effective. And you know, you have to be careful about posting photographs of the children, obviously. That's something you have to be very careful about. But the other side of it is, we're going to the park today, we're going to the museum, we're doing whatever, and post it after the fact so they don't know you're gone and where you are, but post it the next day. We went yesterday, you know, this kind of thing. Use it judiciously and safely. That's important, but use it. We can also help you create a Facebook page. Not me personally, but staff members that can help you do that. And we're happy to do it. There's no charge for that at all. So think about doing it, and if it's something that would be helpful, look into it, because I think it's cheap advertising. It's very popular. Lots of people view it. And look at the demographics. Who do you want to reach?
Young people, with kids.
You want to reach people with kids. That's right. Our fastest growing demographic right now on Facebook is, guess who? It's grandparents. Actually, it's women over 50. But there's still lots and lots and lots and lots of your demographic that's on there. It's a huge number. And you probably can reach more of the demographic you're trying to reach through Facebook than any other means. You can't afford to reach that many people through any other means in most businesses. So it's worth looking at. Okay, so after we've done all this and we have all our numbers, we have our income and we have our expenses. Then we've got to make it balance. Or we have to see if it does balance. Does it? Probably it doesn't. Because we want to look at our expenses. We want to include in that estimate things that we may want to add to our program in the next year. So it may not balance. So what do? We've got to start making some tough decisions. Can we really afford to buy all that new equipment? Is it really essential? Do we really have to have this new program? Or can we bump up what we have instead of bringing in something entirely new? A lot of things to look at, but that's where you start. How far off are we? How much do I have to trim from the budget or add to the income? Because it could be either. If I want to keep everything I have in my budget, then it says I've got to generate more income. So you have to look at both sides of it. Cut it, increase income, do both. Usually it's some of both. You do a little bit of both of them. So start again. What do we have to do? What is mandated? Take those off the board because there's nothing we can do about them. And then what are your priorities? And I hope you have a mission statement for your business that would help you to identify the priorities for your business. And be specific with it. To provide the best child care in the area is a statement, but it may not be the best statement. What does that tell you about how to prioritize? I don't know. A little bit. But you really want to look at a statement that goes a little further than that. Everybody wants to be the best. We all want to be the best. So go a little further than that. Where can you reasonably compromise? And I like to add safely. Reasonably and safely compromise. There are some areas that you just can't do much about that, even though it's not mandated, because you think that's a safety issue to your mind. You don't want to change that. But look at those areas where you can compromise. See if any of those policies we talked about can be altered or changed. The absence policy, any discounts you give, that type of thing. Can you do anything about that? How do your fees compare to other centers in the region? Do you know? Do you know how your fees compare? Yes, no, maybe? Is that something you try to keep up with? Find out. Now, if you call a competitor and say, I want to know what you charge, you may not get an answer. We'll call them. But find out what other centers are charging. You may be grossly low, very low. You may be way too low. I see that a lot with small business owners. They underestimate the value of the service or product that they have. And finally, we have to make the final decision about what has to go and what can stay. Now, what if it just doesn't balance? Our break even, but what if it just does not balance? Then you don't have a business. If your expenses are not equal to or above, your income is not equal to or above your expenses, I'm saying it backwards, you don't have a viable business. You may have a charity, which, as I said to begin with, if that's what you want, that's okay. But if that's not what you want, then we need to take a hard look at that, because that may be a situation. Not every business succeeds in every circumstance. Most successful business owners have failed 4 to 5 times in previous business endeavors. So you're in good company. Okay. Most of the major business names that I could throw out have failed miserably several times when they own a business. And it is very, very hard to say, this ain't gonna work. I failed. I can't do this. And then you really have to do, again, some soul searching. Do I want to keep on like this? A business that can't generate at least the break even is not sustainable. It can't last over time. So you may want to keep it going, but you have to understand at some point it's just not going to work anymore. Because what's going to happen with operating cost? They're going to continue to go up. They're going to continue to go up. And if you can't find a way to increase the income, then we've got a big problem. With that break-even formula, you really, really, really want to think through the process of making that balance. How much I have coming in, how much I have going out. I can't tell you how many business owners I talk to that haven't paid themselves in a long time. They don't pay themselves. I hope all of you do. I hope all of you get paid for what you're doing. But a lot of small business owners don't. They just don't pay themselves. And they don't really have a business. It really isn't sustainable if it's not creating enough income for you to live on. So I said in the beginning, I really think that budgeting and creating that cash flow, where does the money come in, where does it get spent, is probably the most critical thing you can do as a business owner. Okay, I've got tools you have there. Once we get it created, what are we going to do? I don't know if I'm on the right, yeah, we're going to monitor. Remember I told you there's a spreadsheet that has 2 columns for each month, one for the estimate, one for the actual. Whether you have two columns per month or whether you use 2 spreadsheets, you really want to compare it at least monthly. This can be something, if you have a bookkeeper, have them do it, but you look at it. You know how that business operates. And then you need to amend it. Remember I said it is not static. And that's one of the things, sometimes we create that budget and we spent time and effort in doing it, and by George, we're going to follow that budget. Well, things happen. We can't always do it. So we have to look at it from the standpoint of, if I miss my guess, then what do I do? And with the cash flow, and I didn't go into that in detail, that's really sort of the same, but there are some differences there. If we're creating a cash flow, we're looking at when money comes in and out. So most businesses have seasonal highs and lows, whether they consider themselves seasonal or not. Do you? And what is it? Summertime, when mom and dad may be home, yeah. So you have a seasonal high and low. So if the first month you look at it and you say, oh wait, I have way more income than I thought, so I'm going to spend it. Then what's going to happen? You better be sure you've planned for that low time, because it's going to happen. So that's another thing, when we chart this out, we can really look at it and say, okay, my income goes down right here, but I still have property tax to pay that month. So again, it's a planning tool. That's what it is used for. It's a planning tool. If you ever need to seek financing to grow the business, you're going to have cash flow history and projections. So it's not wasted time. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get across. When people come into our office and say, I'm just not making much money, first thing we want to see a balance sheet. We want to see cash flow. That's important. That's how you measure the health of the business. In your packet, you have the How Am I Doing book that I've already talked about. And I think don't let this scare you. Don't let any of this scare you. We're hand holders, so we'll walk you through any of this if you have questions. But one of the things you want to do is to read this from the standpoint and think through, how do I apply this to my business? Because this is generic. It's basic information that almost every business can use. So as you look through it, think about, how do I apply it to my business? The other one that you have is what price to charge. Most small businesses, as I said earlier, do not charge enough. They really don't. They don't give their time and their service the value that it deserves. So this is just a guide in helping you ask some questions and try to determine whether that is something that you need to take a hard look at or not, adjusting that. The third one is making business contracts. When you are looking at contracts, how many of you contract with employees? Anybody? Texas is a right to work state, so we have issues there as to how we treat employees. But if you have employee contracts, it's really, really important that you look at it from the standpoint that it is enforceable. Sometimes everybody goes on the internet and gets a partnership agreement, or goes on the internet and gets this kind of sample. That's fine if they're enforceable. And by that I mean, if you have a conflict that involves that contract and it goes to court, is it enforceable? Sometimes just the wording of it means that it's going to get thrown out and it's not worth the paper it's written on. And this could be with anything. If you're expanding in your building, it can be with contractors, it can be with any type of thing where you're doing contracts. So one of the things to look at when you have any kind of contract is whether or not it's enforceable and what the terms are. That's important, and that's in this packet, because terms of contracts affect expenses and income sometimes. So that's important to understand. You also have what is called building a business. I don't remember which side, I think it's in the right side of the packet. It's just a big overview of what we've talked about this morning. The sample budget is on there. We have a lot of worksheets. I didn't bring them because everybody works differently. We have paper worksheets that we're happy to send you. We have electronic worksheets in Excel that we're happy to send you if you want to use one. There are some other references. I think it's important to try to look for things that are specific to your type of business. So there is a sample budget form in there for child care. I'm not sure that one is even, yeah, that one's specific to the child care. That will give you some ideas. One that is not in there because it's just a screen print, but if you will go to a resource that's called firstchildrensfinance.org. First Children's with an S, finance.org. There's a lot of good information on their website. They're basically there to help people operate child care facilities. But the reason I'm suggesting it is because they do have sample worksheets specific to child care online that you can download and use if you want to do that. I also put one in there that has page, 20, 21, I think there's 3 pages for that one, 22, that I think is really good to use to look at some of those costs and income broken down by the components by age. And I think it's a good worksheet to use there. It has a bright red stripe down the side because it's specific, as I said, this is very specific to what you're doing. And I think it will help you to look at some of those numbers. Once you get a viable operational budget / cash flow, sometimes they're used interchangeably, Then you can sit down with a financial advisor or at our center, however you want to do it, whoever you would go to look for assistance, and analyze those numbers and figure out where, from the business standpoint, you need to make some changes in order to improve the life of that business, the financial life of that business. As I said, there is an SBDC at North Central Texas College. There is also one here at Grayson College. Grayson serves Grayson and Fannin County. North Central serves Cook County, and Denton and Munster, I think. So if you have questions, please reach out. I mean, that's why we're here, is to help small business owners. And we can help you with research. We can help you in looking at what is going on in your industry. We have a lot of resources, databases that we pay for specifically to use to generate information that our clients can use. So please take advantage of that free resource. It's out there, it's tax funded, so please take advantage of it. All of the centers do work by appointment, so dropping in and expecting to find a counselor that can sit down and talk right then is probably not a good idea. Call and make an appointment, tell them what you need, because different counselors on our staffs have different areas of expertise. And so depending on what the client needs, we assign them to a specific counselor. It's one of the reasons I really push doing a cash flow, because cash is money in and money out. Think of it like you do a checking account. And what we want to be sure of with a business is that you have the money in your account to pay your bills when they're due. Now, if your employees, if it's payday and you say, I'm sorry, I don't have the money to pay you, what's going to happen? Number one, you're violating labor laws, okay, and you don't want to go there. Yeah. What if you don't get paid? I know I've had a couple of snafus with some part-time employees where they got their payroll in late, so it didn't get in the first batch of checks, and it was a day or two late, and they pitched a fit. Fortunately, I don't do payroll, so I sent them to somebody else to complain. You know, it was their fault. They didn't get their timesheet in, but it didn't mean they were any happier about it. So you really have to think about it. And again, is it a charity? Is it a business? A charity is giving away service. A business is being compensated for service. So I like that question. I think it's a good way to challenge yourself when you look at some of these numbers to say, what am I doing? Why am I here? Do you ever ask yourself that? I do. I do a lot. Why am I here? Why don't I go start these businesses that, you know, everybody's going to be a millionaire overnight?
I have a question about increasing your tuition.
Okay.
How often is that appropriate? Because, you know, we're in a rural area, and it's a low-income area.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we did have to go up just to meet the cost.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't want to do a drastic increase.
Okay.
But we're still below. It's kind of hard to gauge because we're in a small town. And
Right.
so it's not like there's a daycare on every corner. So would you do that annually until you feel like you're up with the?
I would take a serious look at doing it annually. If you are not profitable, you can't wait very long.
Right.
You may just have to make some drastic changes immediately. I think keeping people informed and letting them know the why is a critical factor. If you provide transportation, for example, what happened to gasoline costs went sky high. There's nothing you can do about it. Everybody's suffering from the same thing. But if you're going to give my child the care that I want you to do, I have to pay for it. So people understand that kind of thing if you make them aware of why you're doing it. You're not doubling your salary as a business owner, okay? This is because our transportation and our food costs have gone up. And anytime transportation goes up, food costs go up. That's a fact of life. It's because these factors have gone up significantly, and in order to continue to provide the level of service we're providing, we have to increase fees. There aren't many people that won't understand that because we're doing that at home. That's what happens in our own homes, in our own families. So I think a big part of how frequently and how often is how you approach it.
Well, we took over the existing center.
Okay.
And so it was, we wanted to change the teachers because they did not have the quality. So in order to get the quality we wanted,
You had to pay more.
You have to pay more. And so we did, we went through all of that. But again, still, we're not up to where we are profitable, but we're not up to the, what the other small towns around us are.
Where are you as far as how far away from profitability?
No, we are profitable.
Okay, I thought you said you were not
No,
at that
we
point.
are.
Okay. So again, look at the options. So if you're in a rural community, I'm guessing a lot of people go outside the community to work. So where do they go? Think about where people go.
They go to McKinney or Dallas.
Okay.
Charging.
That's where I'm going. If they took their children with them,
Yes.
how much would it cost them? I just think educating your customer is the key. Let them know why you're doing it and help them to understand it. And I think a key in there, and again, this is personal opinion, but I think the key is saying if we maintain the same level of service. So if you want your children to have field trips, we have to increase our cost because it's costing us more. So I think that's a trade-out, and I think it's something that usually works. Now, some people, remember our 10% rule, some people are at the limit and they just cannot afford anymore. Well, life isn't fair. One of our presidents said that, and I can't remember which one. I think it was Jimmy Carter years ago, telling my age. Life isn't fair. We can't all afford everything we want. I can't afford everything I want. I want a full-time maid and a cook. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we have to work within reality, but again, we have to have a viable business. And in some cases, in all honesty, mom's better off to quit work and keep the kids. It's cheaper than providing childcare. So that's a reality. Now, when it's a single mom, we've got a lot of other issues, and there are a lot of other services out there to pull into play. And I think one of the things, and I just glossed over it, but one of the things mentioned here was social services. Be aware of them. Be aware of the social services. Not that you're going to provide them all, and not that you're in charge of everybody's life, but be aware of those services so that you can refer people if they're struggling. If somebody is consistently late paying, why? Is there a social service out there that can help them? And that is a benefit to you. So I think it's really important to be aware of what's out there. Find out if there are grants. Find out if there are other sources of funding. She raises funds for her successfully. Think about that. It can be something that's simple, but think about it. There are a lot of things out there. If you use, and this is always, I spend a lot of time with this with people who have retail. If you use vendors, food vendors, I don't know, whoever, see if you can negotiate with them. See what you can do. Pull on their heartstrings. These cute children. See what you can do. Maybe they'll donate something. May not be every month, but it might. There are a lot of companies out there that do a lot of community service. And what you want to do is publicize their community service, because that makes them more interested in doing it. So if we have, I started to say Bluebell ice cream once a week. Probably not this week, right? They'll be back. But if you have a company that's going to donate something to you, do something with that. Help them, help publicize their business, because then it creates a win-win situation. And you can do that.
Walmart's real good to donate, and I think they must, set it aside or something. So as long as the person, we had, we were having Thanksgiving meals for our family.
Mhm.
Moms and dads and would come in and have Thanksgiving meals, and we got almost everything donated
Exactly.
just by asking.
But you have to ask, and that's the real key. And if you're not good at it, find somebody that is, and get them to help you with it. But most companies will. A lot of companies will do a one-time donation. Some of them will do things on and on. It just depends. A lot of grocery stores will donate. Grocery stores have like a 3% profit margin because why? Everything's perishable, okay? Everything expires. So a lot of grocery stores will give things away because, you know, the expiration date's coming. It's still perfectly good. So think outside the box. Figure out ways that you can generate additional income. And then think about why you need to raise your rates and how to educate your customers as to why that's happening. I think that's really important, because that relationship, it's critical. Any other questions, comments? Do you think this will be helpful? Do you think you will do it? We will help you. I promise we will help you. We meet with clients at our campus in Van Alstyne or at Grayson. North Central Texas has a campus at North Central Texas College in Gainesville and also in not Denton, what is it? Yes, Corinth. So we will go to client businesses. I'm sure can talk Janie Bates into letting us have a corner at the workforce building to meet with you. We try to go where you are. We can come to your center. What we do ask is that we have a room with a door, okay? Because it is confidential information and we need quiet for a while. So let us know how we can help you. Let North Central know how they can help if you're in their service area. That's our purpose for being, and it's free of charge. That's one of those collaborative deals, okay? We'll help you. All we ask is that you tell us how it worked. If it was successful, let us know, because that's what pays our bills, because we're grant and tax funded to say, look, 30% of our clients started a business. That's economic development. So we will ask you to do that. But that's the only string.
So you're saying that you'll help, but like in what areas? Are you like in financial funding area?
Okay, we are not lenders.
Organizing area?
We're not lenders, but we know a lot of them. So when we have someone that comes in and needs a loan, then we start working with them to find a lender who will make that type of loan. We help get all of the loan documents ready to send. We don't do it, we help, okay? We teach you to fish, we don't fish for you. We will help you to get those loan documents, that package put together to take to the lender. We can't recommend a loan, but our staff from time to time has gone with someone when they went to meet with the lender for moral support or to answer questions. If you know, we can't say you should make this loan to a lender, but we can help from that standpoint. The other things we do, we help you to do financial analysis. Where, you know, it's like the boat's leaking. Where's the hole? I don't see one. Where is it? So we have a lot of tools, worksheets that we use to help you do that. We can bring in consultants. I've for years had a QuickBooks consultant, and he retired despite my begging. Wanted to spend time with his grandchildren for some reason. But we will be replacing that. But for example, if you keep your records on QuickBooks, we had him on staff. If you had questions, it's not working right, I don't know how to set it up, we have him meet with you and help you with that. We have, who are our other consultants? We have a consultant that helps set up Facebook and websites, all that kind of thing. So we have a lot of resources. And different centers to some extent have different resources, but we all have a core of resources that we can help with. So,
Do you have a list of grants available?
we can help you find where they are. Yeah. If you go to the SBA website, sba.gov, there is a link on there to search for grants, and it will list any number of grants. And we can also help you prepare documentation for the grant if you find one. That's just something we do. Yeah, we don't have money in the top drawer, but.
And are these services and available for nonprofit and faith-based centers as well?
To a large extent. Mm-hmm. It's a little different situation, and we don't work in that area as much. So it's a little different, and as I said, we do, and we have some not-for-profit. It's just not as common as the for-profit businesses that we work with. But we can, yes. We cannot, SBA funding cannot be used to promote a specific religion. I couldn't, for example, if you came in and said, I want an SBA loan, which is actually a loan guarantee, but I want an SBA loan to start a Catholic bookstore or a Baptist bookstore. No, they won't do it. But if you want to start, technically, if you, and again, it's one of those fine lines when you're talking about it, but a religious bookstore that includes all sorts of religious information probably could be approved. So there is because funding can't be used to promote a specific religion. That's the hitch, federal funding. So, any other questions? I hope this has been helpful. As I said when we started, this isn't the fun part of running a business, but I think you'll feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment. I think you will feel a sense of relief. We know, psychologists tell us that when we are most stressed is when we feel we're out of control, that we can't control what's happening around us. So this gives you a measure of control by helping you understand where you can increase, decrease funding and expenses and make that match, that balance. So hopefully, if you don't do everything, at least there's something you've learned that will be helpful. But give us a call and let us help you. SBDCs are anxious to help. Thank you for coming. Good luck.